Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I am here with the unfortunate book tag. This tag was created by What Page Are You On, and I was tagged by the lovely May Cho, and I will link both of their channels down below. Number 1. A book you would consider a fortunate slow burn. I'm going with Seraphina by Rachel Hartman. I really love this book. I feel like it has such an interesting take on dragons and how those would interact with the human world, and I really love the world building and the writing of this book. I see a lot of reviews that complain about it being really slow, and honestly, when I saw that, I was really surprised because I feel like there is always something happening. It might not be big dramatic plot stuff, it might be like political intrigue or like world building or like character development, but everything is paced really beautifully and it always feels like what's happening is important to the story. So that's what I consider to be a fortunate slow burn. Number 2, a book with an unfortunate death. And ironically, I think this is irony, I'm going with Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. I understand a lot of the, like, what happens to the characters, whether that's good or bad. I understand why a lot of it happens, like it makes sense for the story. But there was one character death that just really broke my heart, and I feel like I could undo any of them, it would be that character death, because I just really connected with them and I loved like how much depth there was to that character and how they were so different from maybe how they would first appear or how the characters first thought of them. If you're interested in who I'm talking about and you've read the book, I will definitely talk about it with you in the comments, but yeah, devastating. Number 3 is a book with an unfortunate setting you would not want to live in. And I don't usually repeat books, but Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. Any world that is described in this book is done beautifully, and there are a couple places that sound so like captivating and interesting, but I know if I just stepped foot in them, I would be dead. Like, so fast, man. Number 4, a book that was unfortunately laborious to read. I'm going with David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Now, I definitely did read this book very young. I think I was 10 years old. I was in 5th grade when I read this, and I had pretty much gone through the section of our library that was like, I guess appropriate for my age range or whatever. I had read a lot of the books already. I'd basically read every book that like kind of interested me, so I picked up this one because it was technically at what they decided my reading level was. And it was just so slow and pointless, and like I didn't like any of the characters. I just didn't get like the point of this book, and I think even if I read it today, I don't think I would enjoy it. Like, I might understand a little bit more, but I still don't think I would like the characters or like the plot line of the book, so. Number 5, the best book featuring a fortunate friendship. One of my favorites is The Castle Behind Thorns by Mary Haskell. This is such an incredible friendship between our two main characters, Peralta and Sand, and I really love all of their interactions because they fight a lot, but it always, I don't know, it always makes sense why their personalities would clash a little bit, but they do come to understand and appreciate each other so much, and I feel like this is just such a really beautiful example of a well-developed friendship, and I highly recommend this book. Number 6, a book that unfortunately no one talks about. I'm going with Marisi by Maria Turchaninov, translated by A.A. Prime, and I do think a big part of the reason is because this book is translated, the series is, it just doesn't get like the same amount of publicity and things that I think books written here do, and that's kind of a shame because this is a fantastic series. It's definitely really intense, and there's a lot of content and trigger warnings, not so much in this book, but definitely for the second one, but it's such a beautiful world, and the female friendships in this series are so fantastic, and I think the social commentary on feminist issues is handled just beautifully. I will link a recommendations video where I talk about this series a little bit more in case you're interested, but I'm kind of on a mission to get more people to read this series because I do think it is so underappreciated. Number 7, a book that unfortunately or fortunately transformed and or haunts you. I'm going with Tiger Lily by Jodi Lynn Anderson. This is a Peter Pan retelling from the perspective of Tinkerbell, but it's focusing on the character of Tiger Lily. It sounds really confusing, but it's not really. That is just a beautifully told story, but it's so heartbreaking. Like, that book is just so sad in multiple ways that I really, like, I've never been able to reread it. I got it from the library, and I've thought a couple times about picking up a copy because it's such a fantastic book, but I don't know if I could bring myself to read it again because it just rips your heart out. I don't remember all of the content warnings, but I know that there is some kind of like transphobia issues, although I think it would technically be more of a two-spirit situation, but it's a beautiful book, but so sad. Number 8, an unfortunately overhyped book. I'm gonna go with An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I wanted to love that book so much. I really love fantasy that centers around like Roman history or civilization, and I think that the hype really did get to me for that book because by the time I finally got around to reading it, so many people had raved about it and so many people had just talked about it, like not even spoilers, just like talked about what an amazing book it was, that I had all these expectations about how good it was going to be and like what kind of directions the plot would take even, that I was just setting myself up for disappointment, and unfortunately that's what happened. I've heard that the later books get better, but like that they're even better than the first book, but I don't know if I like really didn't care for the first one. Am I gonna like it if it's just a continuation of the same story with the same characters? I don't know. Let me know if you guys have an opinion on that. Number 9, a book taking place in the unfortunate future. Sunshine by Robin McKinley. This is a really interesting book. I talked about it really frequently right after I read it. It's like a mashup of urban fantasy, a little bit of paranormal, not exactly romance, just I guess paranormal, and dystopian, because it does take place in an unfortunate future where like civilization as we know it has kind of just collapsed, but that's not really the main point of the story. It's kind of the aftermath and just like ordinary people and how they're going on with their lives amidst all these supernatural creatures. It's a really, really weird book, and it's definitely not something I recommend to everyone because it is such a specific kind of story, but I will say I'm not a big fan of dystopian, paranormal, or really urban fantasy, and I really enjoyed this book. I think if you like the characters, you're gonna really enjoy it, and this is also another kind of slow burn story, which I'm a huge fan of. Number 10, a book that gets unfortunately or fortunately plot heavy towards the end. I'm going with The Sin Eater's Daughter by Melinda Salisbury. One of my least favorite books ever, I think, definitely of this year. It's just, it's so weird and it's so boring and the characters are so awful, and then at the very end, the author tries to throw in all these like plot twists that try and explain the things that happened before, and it just doesn't work because at that point I just like don't care. And also there was this random like incest subplot that was just like, or attempted incest subplot that was just really unnecessary and uncomfortable. Number 11, a book with fortunate or unfortunate themes of mental health. Going with the recent one, and that is Shut Out by Cody Keplinger. This book, I think it has unfortunate mental health themes. I talk about this more in the wrap-up where I mention this book, which I will link, but if you're going to throw around terms like OCD and kind of act like your character has this condition, I think you have to be careful about how you use it. And I know that portrayals of mental illness or things like that are going to be different for every person because obviously everyone's experiences are different. But to me, this character, or like the way this character was handled, was just not good. It was not very sensitive. It was not very informed. I think there were some characteristics that our main character, what was her name? Such a forgettable book. Lissa, there were some things about her that I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then there were some things where I'm like, does the author know what OCD is? It just was really, I don't know, I didn't like it. I would not recommend this for its mental health portrayal or really anything else about this book. Number 12, a book with a fortunate or unfortunate family, and I went on the positive side this time because that's hard to find, and that is Bryony and Roses by T. Kingfisher. This is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. It's really short, and actually this is I think one of my favorite retellings of that story, so if you're interested in getting into retellings, I think this is a good one to start with. But this is just so much fun. I really, really love the main character Bryony, and I really enjoy her interactions with her sisters that we see. Like, they're obviously not present for the entire book because of, like, the basic plot of Beauty and the Beast, but their interactions are so good, and just from, like, the first few scenes with them, you totally get how close these girls are and how much they mean to each other, and I really love that. And finally, number 13 is a book you unfortunately wish you could fortunately read for the first time again. And I love this question, but I actually had a really hard time with it because a lot of the books that I love to read over and over again are ones where I think it's important that I read them for the first time at like a certain time in my life, you know? But I ended up going with one of my all-time favorites, and that is Still Star-Crossed by Melinda Taub. I talk about this book quite a bit. It's a sort of retelling of like the aftermath of the Romeo and Juliet play, but it follows two side characters from that play, very, very minor characters, Benvolio and Rosaline. Basically, they are thrown together into a kind of arranged marriage that is supposed to finally bring peace to the two warring families, because predictably things were not just completely solved after the end of that play. And then there's like this mystery element and a murder, and these two characters are like, neither of us wants to marry the other one, so let's solve this mystery and we can be off the hook for marrying each other. And of course there is a hate-to-love romance trope, and just everything about this book really speaks to my soul. I love the writing, I love the Shakespeare elements, I think the characters are fantastic. Rosaline is one of my all-time favorite characters, ever. I just really, really love her, and this is a book that I would just love to be able to read for the first time again, because even though I remember how exciting it was as like the twists and turns kind of unfolded, or as how like the character moments happened and like certain scenes, I sort of remember how much fun they were the first time. I would love to be able to experience that again. Okay everybody, that was the unfortunate book tag. I will tag maybe a couple of people in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!